Hello, hi everyone, and welcome to the ABG and KLAR Power Hour. Hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, depending where you're dialing in from today. Today we're here to explore GEO and how AI is redefining brand visibility. I am Christina Peyton, I'm the founder of KLAR, and we are focusing on helping businesses translate complex ideas into clear brand narratives, which is probably something that everyone's sort of very focused on in this kind of highly competitive business environment. And I'm here today with my partner Antoine from Mention Lab, who is going to be walking us through a short demo a little bit later on in the session today. And if you have any questions for us, please drop them into the chat and we will answer them towards the end of the session. We're looking at about 30 minutes or so here today, but don't be shy and ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer them as well towards the end. So I'm going to be sharing my screen and get up some slides for us now and kick us off formally. So I think that, if you look back the last couple of decades, marketing teams have really been focused on winning visibility through search. And we are now going through a new change and where consumers aren't just searching, they are asking AI. So that's the purpose of today, to help you understand what is changing and what you also can start doing about it today. But before we dive in, I love to just do a quick show of hands, even though I can't really see anyone here on my end, but want to get an understanding. Perhaps we can take a look at it towards the end. Who opens ChatGPT, Perplexity, or any of the other large language models before going on Google today? And I think that's really what we're starting to see everywhere. Increasingly people are asking AI for recommendations before going onto a website. And previously we used to mainly use Google for simple questions, what time the movie starts, what's the nearest grocery shop. But now we can ask AI most anything. So if you're looking for a restaurant, what's the best Japanese restaurant in my area? And what's the best airline to fly to Europe? And the AI will have already done the research for us. And that means that the LLMs are quickly becoming the first touch point in the buying decision. And that shift has really big implications for brands and also for marketers, meaning that brand perception is now formed before visiting a website. So we're now moving from competing for clicks to competing for recommendations. And that means if your brand isn't featured in the AI answer or the list of recommendations, you may not be part of that buying decision process. So LLMs are now the first touch point, right? If you start researching a product or a service. So as an example, if you're looking at asking an LLM about batteries, you might get the Amazon Basics come up instead of Duracell, which obviously is one of the more recognized battery brands in the world. And why is that? Well, it's because the LLMs aggregate signals. They really look at things like reviews, value, and availability to get a list of trusted answers for you. So if people get the answer quickly, they don't often ask another question. So if you think about travel, if someone really looks at kind of flying, we all like obviously in the planning our holiday vacations for the summer, what would be the best airline to fly to Europe or depending where you are? And if the LLM come back with only one recommendation and not a list of options, then the brand that's recommended would have already won that moment of influence. That means that the first impression for your brand might already be written by AI. And also for marketers, that means that the influence is happening much earlier on in the funnel. And obviously you want to make sure, as a marketer, that your brand is part of that answer. So if we talk about GEO or Generative Engine Optimization, what that actually means for brand, I think at its core, it's really about preparing your brand to be found, understood, trusted, and cited. And I think that's a really important distinction here. It isn't about the gaming algorithms like SEO sometimes work. It's more about making sure that the AI systems can confidently explain your brand It's really trying to synthesize information. What it does, it kind of cross-checks all the sources to deliver you the most trusted answer. And I think when you looked at SEO, I think the goal there was really to make sure that you appeared in the link or the search results. But if you ask AI tools a question, now they're really getting you like an answer or a list of recommendations. And obviously, you want to make sure that your brand is appearing in that list, and that is the one that the LLMs is talking about. So if we take a quick look at the difference between traditional search and AI search, because I think this is really where the real shift is becoming clear. In the Google world, click-through rates can be quite high, but the truth is that dwell time often is quite low, because people, don't immediately find what they want. They're going to start bouncing off and looking at other, alternatives. And when it comes to AI search, that works a little bit differently, because the click-through rates can be lower because people are often getting the answer directly in that interface specifically. So they're not necessarily opening 5 different tabs anymore. They're relying on that list of recommendations or the summary, whatever, like the question they're looking at. So, but what's really kind of interesting and what we're looking at next is when tools, any of the LLMs are evolving quite quickly and rapidly, as we know, and it's obviously many of us are struggling to keep up with all the amount of change. But as we're starting to see actions more embedded into these experiences, like shoppable link, for instance, and also there is, OpenAI has started to pilot some of the advertising in the US. And when someone gives you one clear recommendation and one clear action, that normally means that you will just take that one step. And I think that's a really important thing to consider for any brands or marketers, because you want to make sure that you're part of that answer if you want to win that visibility race. So what we're really talking about here is that shift from SEO to GEO, and that shift is really changing what marketers need to focus on if they want their brand to show up in those recommendations, right? So when you look at search, the visibility was built around pages. It was like the blogs, it was the search rankings, websites, and those search engines really retrieved information and gave you that list of links that you then clicked on. You did your comparison and navigated your way through them. But when it comes to AI, that works a little bit differently in the sense that it doesn't just retrieve the information. It would also synthesize it and analyze it for you, and then it will generate a summary of those recommendations. So users are not just navigating through those pages, they are receiving an answer. And I think that's a really important shift, that we're essentially moving from navigation through to interpretation. So I think also that in the past, we were kind of looking at success metrics in terms of winning those clicks. But today it's all about being included in that answer or that recommendation. And we want to make sure that the AI tools can understand and also trust, but more importantly, confidently explain your brand and whatever that means. Excuse me. So if we take a quick step back and look what that really means in practice, there's a few patterns that we're starting to see. And then as we start testing these brands inside the AI systems, there are 3 forces that show up consistently here. Excuse me. And these are the kind of areas that brands and marketers really need to focus on if you want to appear in the AI recommendations. So first of all, it's visibility. And visibility in AI works a little bit different because it really responds to real questions. So any brands that show up are the ones that are genuinely answering questions that people are asking. And then secondly is around authority, because LLM tends to really favor expertise. So any content that has been tied to recognized experts, credible sources, tend to perform much better than any of those anonymous content pieces. So I think it's a way you can almost think about it as quality over quantity. And I think a good example here could be the Mayo Clinic, the health website, because it does get cited frequently because they have a lot of expertise that's clearly visible and also tagged within their content. And then the third one is around trust. Yeah, these AI systems really prefer any information that's fresh, transparent, and also properly sourced, as I just mentioned. Any brands that reference data, have these sources clearly cited, and keep content up to date as well, tend to perform much better than any of the other sort of content pieces that aren't marked properly. So when you put these three pieces together, you're going to start seeing some really interesting results, because the tools tend to really reward clarity and also credibility. And then when you start thinking about GEO in this more structured way, I think it's starting to become quite clear that isn't just a technical shift, because marketers now need to focus on, first shift is around thought leadership. And, previously you used to be kind of thinking about content or thought leadership more from having an opinion about something. But now it really needs to be cited. It needs to be provable. That means that the LLMs are there constantly cross-checking that information, making sure that you have the credible sources, you have the data to back it up, and those reference points, as I touched on earlier. And then I think the second shift is also around how the content is structured. Of course, you want content to be well written, but it also needs to be machine readable. We need the LLMs to really understand the context and the expertise behind it, because those are the signals that they really kind of are considered as trustworthy. And then thirdly is the shift is around reputation, because reputation compounds much faster inside these LLMs, and whether it's positive or it's negative. So the signals that the AI picks up on about your brand, whether it's the credibility, it's the expertise, that's going to start influencing how confidently your brand is being recommended, which also means something quite interesting, that AI visibility is now becoming more part of that brand equity piece. And also marketing is now moving closer to reputation management than campaign management. So this is also bringing us to a really important shift. So I think up until now, marketing leaders are focused on share of search, and we have built dashboards around it. We've done the tracking when it comes to rankings and monitored the traffic on the website and so on. But these AI systems are increasingly shaping the conversations that people are having when they research a specific category. So if your brand doesn't appear inside those conversations at all, that means some of your competitors can actually start gaining some credibility much faster through these AI recommendations, if their content is easier for the tools to interpret. So obviously that's really worth noting. But the thing is, a lot of companies aren't really measuring that yet. So we are moving away from share of search to share of answers. And I think any brands that really understand this at this point, going to have a significant advantage. So I think it's a good moment for us to just kind of, pause and ask a simple question to everyone. And, is whether the AI tools would look at your brand today, what do you think it would say? Would it mention you at all? And if you're taking a quick look here to, comparison between two different brands in the same market, whether it's retail or it's travel, brand A here produces a lot of content, and their messaging will be polished and the insights are fairly generic. And then the stats might be a little bit dated. And then you compare that with brand B, and they have publishes their insights from named experts. They will cite some credible data and sources, and they're structuring the content in a way that clearly explains the topic as well. Obviously, when the LLM or the AI tools will analyze it too, then they will select the brand that demonstrate the expertise more clearly and credibly. So, and I think that's a really important reflection point. Will you show up in the AI answers, and will you be cited? And obviously the brands that win are the ones that the AI tools understands the best. But so, we're kind of giving you a little bit of a background here about how, GEO works conceptually, and, wanted to kind of move it over to become showing you in real life. So want to introduce Antoine now, who's going to be showcasing how brands appear inside the LLMs. And Mention Lab, which is the agency, they have their own bespoke tools, and you're going to sort of showcasing this, applying it to a real brand example. So over to you, Antoine.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, I'm Antoine. I'm one of the partners at Mention Lab and also leading your regions. At Mention Lab, we take that hybrid approach to GEO with our own in-house tools and GEO expert services to really fast-track your brands to be recommended by any LLM. So we're not just tracking visibility, we're really reverse engineering how any of the latest LLMs decides what to recommend so we can influence it. Let me show you what that looks like in practice on L'Oréal Paris, specifically on their face cream. So first step, what is very important are the queries. So making sure that we start with the right audits, with the right tags, with queries that people are likely to ask, group into key product categories. So for example, you see the face and the creams. And also with a mix of comparative questions to understand where you position against the competition. So for example, here where you have which anti-aging facial gives the best result for wrinkles. Informative questions like here to know if your product information are visible and understood by AI. And also finally, branded questions. So we understand how your brands are being perceived by LLM. So we can run this audit on really any LLM, showing you here. That's consumer use through APIs, but most importantly, by scraping the data, which means we can see everything a consumer might see on the interface, which will be key when we start tracking shopping recommendation and in the future, geo advertising. Because also LLM doesn't give the same answer twice, we found that running each query around 10 times yield probabilistic accuracy and thus accurate measurements of our optimization efforts later on as we go through times. Those multiple runs also matters later as LLM generates each time variation of those questions, which will be additional insights that I will show you later on. So now let's move back to the overview. So quick glance of where you are, where you stand, who's winning, where you're strong, where you're weak, for example. And this is where our expert will come and really start analyzing the data from, multiple dimensions. So first, of course, depending of the different product categories, the different audiences, or maybe very specific value proposition, according to the different AI models that we are assessing, according to the different language that we are auditing, and also according to the countries, because of course, all of those results will be completely different according to all of those parameters. So what is very interesting is our expert can come and look at the results at a query level, seeing where you are, who's the competition, what are the type of sources. We can drill down, at all of the questions that were coming back through time through the different models. Then another very important screen are sources. So that's one of the key pages because, LLM doesn't make things up. It will pull from sources. We can see exactly which websites are being cited. See, so that's what we start to see here. Because those are the websites that are shaping the answer. Which are media, expert sites, forums, And of course, brand.coms, your brand.coms, but also competitor brand.coms. The complexity of a multi-country with different languages and products is that the source mix do change on every LLM. Our role is to really make sense of all of it and have a cohesive action to execute, so we can really maximize influence across the different LLMs. And then very quickly, what you see, for example, here for L'Oreal, is that your website is only a tiny part of the story. For example, here with L'Oréal Paris USA. And if you're not represented in those sources, which is, you can see here, not the case, then you're not part of their answer. One of the two, I would say, high-level approach to resolve this splits into one, which is, earn visibility through PR, media, and then engaging with the communities. And number two, it would be to control your narrative through your own, but also your close partners, .coms. So like this, we can influence the response. So now let's see how we can have a bird's-eye view of your brand gaps. So in the competitor pages, of course, I can see how I'm doing through time against my competition, how I'm going up or down. But what is very important also to us is this, is how are we being perceived and how are we scoring specifically on a specific value proposition or audiences, to quickly have a glance where the brand is winning or losing, and which inform us where might be those content gaps. So like this, we can go and really deep dive and then come up with a strategy and a clear action plan to execute. So, for example, you see L'Oréal Paris is quite strong on affordability, but on the perception of a streaming agent, it's completely losing, where Olay is winning here. So let's go into fan outs, which was what I was talking earlier, because LLM doesn't just answer the question you ask, it also rewrites variation of it. So for example, if I'm asking for which face cream works best to reduce wrinkles, then we see all of the fan outs that AI have been generating. And one of the big insights that we start to see here is the dermatologists recommended, which was maybe not necessarily perceived, or we know that we need to really put a strong emphasis on this, because that's what AI is looking for specifically for this category. And that's obviously give us immense insights. And another thing that is quite important, last but not least, is a major belief of ours is also getting ready for the future of an automated life. One of it, which is shopping. Because we are scrapping the data, we can capture the full outputs, including which products are being shown, the pricing, the retailers, and all of the visuals that are being shown through the different interface. So you can see exactly how your product is being presented to the LLM interface to the consumer. And there's real implication, because if your product content is weak on retailer pages, or your visual don't hold up, that you can see, for example, here, then very likely you will lose a sales opportunity in a key moment of high conversion rates. To conclude, before, you had to influence the consumer directly or the group of people around them. Now there's a new layer in between LLMs and soon AI agents that are acting like your own personal life assistants. And if you understand how it builds its answer, you can influence that new layer of influence. That's what Mention Lab give you. It's really a clear view of what's happening and what to fix across content, PR, and commerce. Handing over to you, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine. See if I can get my deck back up again. One sec. Hold on. Here we go. Right, so I hope that gave everyone a sense of how AI is interpreting brands inside of a beauty category. We found that when we start analyzing companies through the GEO lens, many brands are actually strongest on technology. They've invested a lot in websites, the CMS, the SEO, but where many brands actually struggle is on the authority side. It's that layer of expertise and citations and signals, as I mentioned earlier, that the AI systems use to determine whether a brand should get recommended. So I think traditionally a lot of brands look perfectly healthy from the outside, when it comes to like looking at it from a marketing perspective. But when you look at it through the same doing this analysis via the AI lens, we'll see something slightly different. And they might not necessarily be recommended as their expertise isn't clearly recognized. But if you start making some relatively small structural changes, clarifying the expertise, adding cited sources or structuring the FAQs, more clearly, because back to what I was saying earlier, tends to be favoring any content that answers real questions, that obviously what consumers are doing and asking the LLM for any recommendations, then suddenly we're going to start seeing a real shift. And I think these small structural changes really can create a big difference in terms of visibility for the brand. And this is also what the GEO Readiness Index is designed to do. So once you start looking at brands through this GEO lens, and when you look at which brands actually AI trust and why that is, what we noticed is that this visibility inside the systems increasingly become a form of reputational capital. And so if your brand is largely silent inside these AI conversations, that will ultimately become a risk over time. But if you hear this for the first time, don't get alarmed. You're probably thinking, oh, we have to rebuild all of our content. But the reality is that it doesn't require a complete rebuild. You can actually create some relatively smaller updates and change and structured ways on how your brand is going to be interpreted by AI. And we approach this as a journey. So first of all, we audit the LLMs and looking how they currently interpret your brand. It's a kind of a reality check, seeing what the tools actually sees. And I think then we will score that visibility to create a clear baseline. And then from there, we will build more authority-led content. And this can be done via a test, to see how the content performs by, again, prompting some real consumer questions. And then I think you want to end by continuously refining and reiterating your content. And I think ultimately it's best practice to be continuing to optimizing your content over time. So once you've started to apply this GEO approach, you're going to start seeing some changes showing up quite quickly. And what's interesting here is that starting point can often look quite healthy, as I said earlier, through the kind of traditional marketing metrics. The blog traffic can be steady, content is being published frequently, and the website's performing. But then when you review the same content through an AI lens, you're going to see slightly different things show up. Many brands actually that we analyze have very few AI citations. It doesn't mean that the content's bad. It's just not been structured in the way that the AI can interpret or reference. So if you start making just a few quick adjustments and improvements, you're ultimately going to start seeing a shift over time. And these pages will then start being referenced inside the AI answers and the LLMs as well more frequently. And I think any of these summaries that AI generates about the brand will become much more accurate and also credible. And I think it's important really to note that, in order to make some of these structural changes, it doesn't require a complete rebuild of all your content. You can make some small structural improvements, and that will really kind of help the LLMs to understand your brand more clearly. So in terms of what you can start thinking about today, well, the good news is that GEO doesn't take years to implement, and most businesses can really start making some meaningful progress in the first 90 days. And it's as simple as a 3-month roadmap. If you're looking at the first month, what will be done is a focus on looking at auditing all the content. Again, it's that reality check, seeing what the AI sees when you look at your brand. Where are you being cited? Where are you missing from the conversation? How does that compare against your competitors as well? And then in the second month, we'll be focusing more around the upgrading. Again, doesn't mean require all of your content to be completely rewritten. You can focus on a smaller number of assets, like updating the category explainers or expert pages, any thought leadership pieces as well, just to make sure that they're structured in a way so it's easier for the AI systems to reference them and understand. And then in month 3, it's about operationalizing this, meaning, sorry, someone's calling on WhatsApp here. And then thirdly, operationalizing, building some simple dashboards and creating internal governance just to make sure that the marketing teams can create and manage content moving forward. So that is really one key thing to remember, is that you can really start with a small number of key brands and assets, and then you build from there. So once you and your team have really started thinking about GEO in a more structured way, you're going to start seeing some real changes happening. And that is the visibility inside the AI systems quickly becoming a form of reputational capital, as I mentioned earlier. And they are becoming more consistently cited and summarized and recommended as well to build that credibility much faster inside of the category. And I think over time that also can become your competitive moat, because once the LLMs recognize you as a brand, a trusted source, it's going to be easier for them to be able to recognize you moving forward as well, to appear in answers and recommendations. But on the flip side of that, if your brand isn't as visible, or they're not able to recognize any of the signals, it's harder for them to recommend you. And I think that's the shift we're seeing. And ultimately, these AI systems are the ones that are able to shape who gets seen and trusted and also chosen. So if we look back at the big picture here, it's an interesting parallel taking place. I think SEO, as where we started off, was one of the kind of forces that really helped to define who won the web back in the days. And now GEO is really playing a very similar role when it comes to shaping who wins the AI race. And I think this is the moment where brands have an opportunity to get ahead. And I think the first step would be around pressure testing your most important content. So you can look at your flagship assets and ask AI how that currently interprets them. And then secondly would be to run a GEO readiness assessment, understanding where your visibility, what it looks like, and authority, and also the trust signal stand today. And then obviously, as I mentioned, you don't need to sort of, you can start with a smaller number of assets and analyzing those. And that's going to help and start building your AI visibility more intentionally. So as brands move more early in this space, we'll have a significant advantage and influence as well to help and shape how people discover and review brands. And I'm going to hand it back to Antoine now for the final check-in here on the question as well. So back to you, Antoine.
Thank you, Christina. Just a quick homework I want you to do right after the call is I want you to go on ChatGPT or even Google and ask about your category questions without your brand name into it, of course, and see how you're being appearing, how is your brand being ranked, how is being recommended. So that would be a good assessment to you. Back to you, Christina.
Perfect. Okay, so to wrap things up, we're going to leave you with one final thought. Any of the brands that win in the AI era won't be the ones that produce the most content. I think it's really about the ones that the LLMs can confidently explain, and that is a huge opportunity, because when consumers ask AI for recommendations, brands that are clear, consistent, and also trusted are the ones that are really going to show up. So start there, audit how you show up, and get clear on your story, because clarity is everything, and I think it's also your most important asset. So thank you everyone for spending time with us today, and thank you to Antoine for sharing the demo and bringing the GEO concept to life, and also to ABG, of course, for hosting us today, and Katarina for facilitating us. I hope this has brought a few ideas that you can take back to the teams. And we're happy to take any questions now from everyone. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions in the chat.
Yeah, we have one question from Mary. So does it work the same for other LLMs, Gemini, Grok, Perplexity, etc.? So if you're talking about if we can assess that, so yeah, so it's exactly the same way a ChatGPT, Gemini, or Grok, or Perplexity works, because it will inherently go online to build that that point of view, and return the question. Now, one of the complexity is according to the market, according to the languages, and of course, according to the LLMs, those sources mix do change. There will be some correlation, of course, but then if you want to, let's say, maximize your visibility on ChatGPT, on AI Overview, and on Perplexity, on those three, then you need to run an audit specifically on those three and making sure that you create an action plan, increase that trust for AI. So like this, whenever it's going to search for the next time, then you will push your brand higher compared to last time.
Perfect. Thank you, Antoine. Hopefully that answered the question, Marie. Anything else from the audience? We will also be, I think Katarina will be sending out the recording as well. If there was anyone on the team who couldn't join today, feel free to share it as well. This is kind of obviously helpful, just kind of getting everyone up to speed and, understanding how you can get started with GEO. And feel free to reach out to me or Antoine if you have any further questions, would like to discuss GEO more in detail. So thank you everyone for joining. I will follow up.